I never wanted to play detective. I've always believed that if you have to snoop, you've already lost. But life doesn't care about beliefs, does it? It throws you into situations that rip the rug out from under you. That's exactly what happened to me on a Thursday evening as I stared out my second-floor bedroom window, watching my wife, Christine, wrap herself around Jake Winters, my supposed best friend. Jake had the smug confidence of a man who believed he had everything under control. Christine? She looked like a kid on Christmas morning. The two of them were whispering conspiratorially, and I didn't even have to strain to hear. They were careless, standing right by his car in my driveway. Bold. Too bold. I'm telling you, Jake, Christine said, her voice laced with laughter, we'll get him to pay for the weekend. The cabin, the food, the works. Jake chuckled, but his tone carried a note of doubt. Chris, I make more money than Mike. I'll pay for it. She shook her head, smirking. You don't get it, do you? The humiliation is the point. Making him foot the bill for us? That's just delicious. I should have felt hurt, betrayed, maybe even furious. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. Like the kind you get right before a storm when the air goes still. I didn't say anything. I just watched as Jake climbed into his car, leaving her with a kiss that made me want to bleach my eyes. When she came inside, Christine didn't even bother to cover her tracks. She strolled into our shared bedroom, letting her dress slip to the floor. Completely naked, she walked into the bathroom, leaving the door wide open. She started fiddling with her makeup as if she didn't have a care in the world. You heard, didn't you? She asked, her tone as casual as someone asking for the weather forecast. I'm leaving you, Mike. Jake and I have plans, big ones. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I sat on the bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror. What did I do to deserve this, Christine? I asked softly. She laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. What did you do? Nothing. That's the problem. You're weak, Mike. A pushover. You just stand there, letting me and Jake walk all over you. I clenched my fists but kept my voice even. So the last 3 years, what were they to you? Convenient. She didn't even flinch. Let's be honest, Mike. You're not a man. Jake is. And tonight, I'm calling him over. Maybe I'll let you watch. You can even take notes. Her words weren't daggers. They were scalpels, slicing clean through. I stood, walked past her, and grabbed my car keys from the dresser. Where are you going? She asked mockingly. Off to cry about it? I paused at the door and turned to her. For a moment, I thought about saying something, maybe a cutting remark or a final plea. Instead, I just said, goodbye, Christine. I slammed the door behind me, leaving her standing there, naked and unbothered. I didn't go far that night. Just far enough to clear my head. I parked at the end of a quiet road, killing the engine and letting the silence wrap around me. The calm didn't last. Her words echoed in my mind like a bad song I couldn't turn off. You're not a man, Mike. It wasn't the insult that got to me, it was the irony. The last 3 years, I'd been bending over backward to make her happy, thinking I was being a good husband. Turns out, I was just giving her the perfect stage to perform her betrayal. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But something deep inside me shifted, like a switch being flipped. I made a decision then and there. I wouldn't let her walk away from this without consequences. The next 3 days were a blur of motion. I didn't wallow. I planned. When I returned home, it was late enough that Christine didn't hear the garage door open. She was probably asleep, or more likely, on the phone with Jake. I parked, grabbed my laptop and a few files from the back seat, and locked myself in my office. The door had never needed a lock before. That night, it did. Christine knocked on the door the next morning, her voice syrupy sweet. Mike? You okay in there? You've been quiet. I unlocked the door just enough to crack it open. I'm fine, I said, curtly. She blinked, taken aback by the abruptness. You disappeared for 3 days. I was worried. I couldn't help but smirk at her attempt to feign concern. Save it, Christine, I said, shutting the door in her face. By the evening of the 3rd day, everything was set. I had leverage, money, and most importantly, a plan. Christine's little affair had gifted me one thing: clarity. I saw her for who she really was, and I saw myself for who I had been. That week, accommodating Mike? He didn't exist anymore. That night, Jake showed up. I watched through the security feed as Christine greeted him at the door. Their kiss was sloppy, gross even. She led him into the house like she owned the place. It was almost comical. "Where's Mike?" Jake asked, glancing around. Christine shrugged. "Locked in his office all day. Let me talk to him first. He's being weird." Jake laughed. "Weird? Mike? Come on, he doesn't have the balls to be weird." She smiled knowingly. "Just give me a few minutes." I heard her heels click against the hardwood floor, approaching my office. She knocked twice. "Mike? Jake's here. He wants to talk." I opened the door, letting it swing wide. "Perfect," I said, stepping aside. "Send him in." Christine's mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but I was already walking past her. "The two of you should talk alone," she said quickly, recovering. Jake walked in, all confidence and swagger, and I shut the door behind him. "Have a seat," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. He sat, leaning back as if he owned the place. "Mike, buddy. Let's talk man to man." I poured myself a drink, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Finally, I turned to him, glass in hand. "Man to man?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Sure. Let's do that." Jake chuckled nervously. "Look, I know this is awkward, but it's better to get everything out in the open, right? Christine and I." "Stop," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "We're not doing this. You're not here to apologize. You're here to negotiate." That wiped the smirk off his face. "Negotiate?" "Don't insult me, Jake," I said, leaning forward. "You want Christine. Fine. But she's not leaving this house with a damn thing unless you pay for her. That's the deal." His laugh was dry, disbelieving. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." I sipped my drink, letting the weight of my words sink in. "I want your Bentley. And 25% of your net worth." He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "That's over $50 million. 52, actually," I corrected, setting my glass down. "And if you don't agree by noon tomorrow, the price doubles." Jake shifted in his chair, his confidence evaporating. "You're crazy." "No," I said calmly. "I'm just done playing the nice guy." When Jake finally left, Christine followed him out, likely to reassure him that this was just some bizarre bluff. I watched them from the office window, my expression cold. This wasn't a bluff. It was just the beginning. By noon the next day, Jake caved. His text was simple: deal. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I waited for the funds to hit the offshore account I'd provided. The moment the transaction cleared, I moved every cent into multiple accounts under different aliases. By the time Jake realized what had happened, the money would be long gone, scattered across continents. Their betrayal had funded my future, but money wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd done. They didn't deserve a quiet ending, they needed a reckoning. With the transfer done, I texted Jake and Christine, "Dinner tonight. 7 p.m. Dress nice." At 7 p.m. sharp, Jake's Bentley rolled into the driveway. Christine floated downstairs in a slinky black dress, one she'd only ever worn for special occasions. She'd removed her wedding ring. A nice touch, I thought. Subtlety was never her strong suit. I watched him swagger to the door, a bottle of wine in hand, wearing his usual smug grin. Christine opened the door, her dress leaving little to the imagination. They thought they were celebrating their triumph over me. Instead, they were walking straight into my plan. "You look stunning," Jake said, his Cheshire grin widening as she opened the door for him. He handed her a bottle of wine before turning to me, his demeanor noticeably cooler. "Mike." "Jake," I replied with a curt nod. "Follow me." In the dining room, I'd gone all out. The table was set with pristine white linens, silver candlesticks, and crystal glasses. A feast fit for royalty, or fools. As they sat, I brought out champagne. I didn't toast. I just smiled, letting them dig their own graves. To new beginnings, Jake said, raising his glass. Christine giggled, clinking hers against his. I smiled as I returned to the kitchen, pulling the lasagna from the oven. I plated it carefully, ensuring each portion looked perfect, then carried it out to the dining room. Mike, this looks incredible, Jake said, already digging in. Christine followed suit, moaning appreciatively after the first bite. Wow. Who knew you had it in you? I gave them a polite smile. There's a lot about me you don't know. They laughed, completely unaware of what was coming. I didn't join them at the table. Instead, I leaned against the counter watching. Waiting. It didn't take long. First, Jake's face paled. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his glass of water. Christine wasn't far behind, her smile fading into confusion. Mike, what's in this? I crossed my arms, my expression unchanging. Nothing lethal. Just a little something to ensure you stay put. Jake's fork clattered to the plate as his head drooped forward. Christine tried to stand, but her legs buckled. She hit the floor with a soft thud, her eyes wide with panic. You bastard, she slurred before everything went dark. I worked quickly. Stripping them both down wasn't pleasant, but it was necessary. With their wrists and ankles bound, I hauled them into the back of a van I'd rented earlier that day. The drive was uneventful, save for their muffled groans as they started to regain consciousness. I parked at the edge of a quiet park just outside the city, far enough from prying eyes, but not too far from the morning joggers who'd stumble across the scene. I dragged them out of the van and to a large oak tree in the center of the clearing. Jake was the first to come around fully. What the? Mike, what are you doing? He croaked, his voice thick with panic. Christine wasn't far behind. You're insane. Untie me right now. I ignored them, wrapping heavy-duty ropes around their naked bodies, binding them back-to-back against the tree. They squirmed and cursed, but it was pointless. Mike, come on. Jake shouted. We can talk about this. Talk. I said, stepping back to admire my handiwork. You've done enough talking. From the van, I retrieved the final touch, a large cardboard sign with bold black letters that read, Cheaters. I hung it around Christine's neck, letting it dangle just above Jake's chest. There. Perfect. Mike, you can't leave us here. Christine screamed, her voice cracking. I crouched to meet her tear-streaked face. Why not? You left me humiliated, Christine. Consider this a fair trade. I took my time cleaning up the scene, ensuring there was nothing left to trace back to me. Their cries faded into the background as I drove away, leaving them shivering and exposed under the pale glow of the moon. By morning, the park would be bustling. Photos would flood social media. Jake's professional reputation would be in tatters, Christine's social life obliterated. And me? I'd be far away, sipping coffee and watching the chaos unfold from a safe distance. Sometimes, justice doesn't need a courtroom. By the time the sun rose, I was already awake, sipping coffee on my porch and scrolling through my phone. Social media was ablaze. Pictures of Jake and Christine tied to the tree were spreading like wildfire. The caption under one of the most shared photos said it all. Cheaters caught and exposed. Karma's a beautiful thing. The comments section was relentless. Serves them right. Whoever did this is a legend. Jake Winters? Isn't that the real estate guy? LMAO, his career is done. The news trickled into more official channels as the day wore on. By lunchtime, local reporters were covering the bizarre incident at the park. They blurred the pictures on TV, but the damage was already done. Jake Winters, the hotshot businessman, was now infamous for something far less glamorous. Christine came home later that afternoon. Well, not home, exactly. She stormed up the driveway, her face red and tear-streaked. Someone must have felt sorry for her and shared her clothes. She was wearing a dress that was several sizes too big, looked like it was thrown on in a hurry. She looked just terrible, tired, and her hair was disheveled. I opened the door before she could knock, leaning casually against the frame. Mike, she shouted. How could you? You, she stopped herself, her eyes narrowing. You planned this, didn't you? I sipped my coffee, letting her accusations bounce off me. I have no idea what you're talking about, I said, feigning innocence. Don't play dumb, she snapped. You left us there like animals. Do you know how many people saw us? My friends, Jake's colleagues. Good, I said, cutting her off. My voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. You deserve it. Her expression shifted, the rage giving way to something more desperate. Mike, please, we can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can start over. I laughed, an actual laugh this time. Fix this? Christine, I don't know if you've noticed, but we're way past fixing anything. But I love you, she cried, her voice cracking. You love me. I repeated, my tone dripping with sarcasm. That's rich. Is that what you told Jake when you were planning your little getaway? Or was that before you convinced him to humiliate me for sport? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, she just stood there, looking small and defeated. For once, she had nothing to say. Here's what's going to happen, I said, stepping closer. You're going to pack your things and leave. I've already talked to my lawyer, and you'll get the divorce papers in a few days. You won't get a dime, not after what you've done. Her face crumpled. Mike, please. No, I said, my voice final. We're done. I barely restrained myself from slamming the door in her pleading face, but she needed to pack, so I let her in and went on to enjoy my coffee and the news. Jake fared no better. By the end of the week, his company's board had called an emergency meeting. His image was irreparably tarnished, and his business partners wanted nothing to do with him. The Bentley he'd so proudly flaunted was repossessed, sold to cover mounting legal fees from a fallout. The last I heard, he moved out of the city. No job, no friends, no Christine. As for me, I moved on. Selling the house felt like shedding dead weight, and I used part of Jake's donation to start fresh in another state. A beach house, a new car, and most importantly, peace of mind. I didn't date for a while. Trust doesn't come easily after something like that. But eventually, I found someone who saw me for who I was, not who they could use me to be. Revenge may not fix everything, but it certainly feels good when everyone gets their due.